China just prohibited American chip exports. Not tariffs, not restrictions, a complete prohibition, and $4.3 trillion in global semiconductor marketplace value is about to evaporate. But here's what nobody's informing you. This isn't about exchange wars. This isn't about politics. This is about the oldest pattern in geopolitical history repeating itself with mathematical precision. The pattern possesses 4 stages. We're entering stage 3 right now. And if you comprehend what arrives next, you'll observe precisely why the next 18 months will reshape global authority forever. Listen carefully. This has transpired before, 3 times in the last century alone. Every single time, the dominant authority refused to believe it was transpiring. Every single time, marketplaces collapsed by an average of 67%. Every single time, a new world order emerged from the ashes. And right now, right this second, it's transpiring again. The distinction? This time, the scale is 10 times larger. The speed is 5 times faster, and you're witnessing it unfold in real time. Let me demonstrate you the pattern. Then let me demonstrate you why it's already too late to halt. Because by the time you finish witnessing this, you'll comprehend something that 98% of investors still don't observe. And that comprehension could be the distinction between protecting your wealth and witnessing it disappear. The pattern is designated technological sovereignty collapse. 4 stages every time, no exceptions. And before you think this is some academic theory, comprehend this. I'm going to demonstrate you 3 historical examples where this precise pattern executed. Same stages, same sequence, same devastating outcome for the dominant authority. Then I'm going to demonstrate you how China is executing this pattern right now, step by step with terrifying precision. Stage 1 is dependency architecture. Here's how it operates. The dominant authority controls a critical technology. They construct the entire global system around it. Everyone requires it, everyone purchases it, everyone becomes dependent. And the dominant authority believes this dependency equals permanent security. Think of it like a narcotics dealer. You don't worry about your customers when they're all addicted. You control the supply, you establish the valuations, you possess all the leverage, or so you think. But here's the complication. Nobody observes until it's too late. Dependency generates vulnerability, and vulnerability generates urgency, and urgency generates something dangerous. Innovation driven by survival instinct. Because when a nation recognizes their entire economy depends on another nation's technology, they don't just accept that forever. They start planning an escape. Stage 2 is asymmetric investment response. This is where it becomes interesting. The dependent nations recognize they're vulnerable, so they execute something the dominant authority never anticipates. They massively overfund domestic alternatives. Not to compete, not to make superior technology, to survive, to achieve independence. And here's the key. The dominant authority observes this investment and laughs. They state things like, they're 20 years behind us, they'll never catch up, their technology is inferior. And they're correct. The dependent nation is behind. Their technology is inferior, but they're not attempting to catch up. They're not attempting to be superior. They're constructing parallel infrastructure good enough to survive without you. Do you observe the distinction? It's critical. The dominant authority is competing on excellence. The dependent nation is competing on independence, 2 completely different games. And the dominant authority doesn't recognize they're playing the incorrect game until stage 3 hits. Stage 3 is sudden decoupling. One day the dependent nation achieves minimum viable capability. Not perfect, not superior, just good enough. Good enough to execute their economy, good enough to support their military, good enough to supply their domestic marketplace. And they flip the switch. They prohibit the dominant authority's technology overnight immediately, without warning, without negotiation. The dominant authority loses its largest customer instantly. Marketplaces panic. Supply chains shatter, revenue forecasts collapse, stock valuations crater, and the entire economic model that seemed invincible just 24 hours earlier suddenly implodes. This is where we are right now with China and semiconductors. Stage 3, the switch is being flipped. And most individuals still think this is negotiable. It's not. Stage 4 is permanent restructuring. The global economy reorganizes around the new reality. The former dependent nation becomes the new hub. Capital flows reverse, supply chains reroute, alliances shift, and the dominant authority they expend the next 20 to 30 years attempting to recover influence they will never fully regain, because once dependency fractures, once trust evaporates, once parallel infrastructure exists, there's no returning. The world has transformed permanently. Now let me demonstrate this isn't theory. Let me demonstrate you the 3 times this precise pattern destroyed dominant authorities in modern history, and pay attention to the specifics, because when you observe how precisely this pattern repeats, you'll comprehend why what's transpiring with China right now was absolutely inevitable. Case study 1. Britain versus American industrial independence. 1800s. Britain controlled global manufacturing. They possessed the optimal steel mills, the most advanced machinery, the most sophisticated factories. The entire world purchased British manufactured goods. America was a customer state, a colony, in everything but name. Raw materials flowed out, cotton, timber, ore. Finished goods flowed in, textiles, machinery, tools. Britain loved this arrangement. They designated it the natural order of exchange. Then America started constructing domestic manufacturing capability. The British establishment wasn't worried. They stated, "American manufacturing is crude, inefficient, decades behind our sophistication. Let them waste their currency attempting." The London newspapers mocked American industrial ambitions. They published cartoons demonstrating American factories producing inferior goods. The British elite genuinely believed American manufacturing would never threaten British dominance. Then 1861 transpired the American Civil War, and suddenly America couldn't rely on British imports. Southern cotton ceased flowing. British suppliers became unreliable during wartime, so America possessed no selection. They constructed everything themselves fast, messy, inefficient, but functional. War manufacturing compelled complete industrial independence in 4 years. By 1870, American industrial capacity had exploded. By 1890, American steel manufacturing surpassed Britain's for the initial time. British steel executives were shocked. They'd been witnessing American investment for 20 years and dismissed it the entire time. They measured quality. America measured volume, different games. By 1900, America became the world's largest manufacturing economy. British industrial exports collapsed by 42% over the next 2 decades. British factory towns emptied out. British steel companies proceeded bankrupt. British industrial workers immigrated to America seeking jobs. The global economic center of gravity shifted from London to New York, from Britain to America within a single generation. Verified, undeniable, Britain possessed the optimal technology. They possessed centuries of expertise. They possessed the most advanced infrastructure. None of it mattered because America achieved minimum viable independence. And once independence was achieved, Britain never recovered their dominant position. The pattern executed perfectly. Stage 1, dependency. Stage 2, asymmetric investment. Stage 3, sudden decoupling. Stage 4, permanent restructuring. Britain expended the next century as a declining industrial authority while America reorganized the global economy around its manufacturing base. But maybe that was a fluke. Maybe it only transpired once. Let me demonstrate you case study 2. America versus Japanese semiconductor independence. 1,970 seconds. America invented the semiconductor. Bell Labs generated the transistor. Fairchild, Intel, Texas Instruments commercialized integrated circuits. The whole world purchased American chips. Japan was the largest customer. Sony, Toshiba, Hitachi, every Japanese electronics company executed on American semiconductors. American chip executives felt invincible. They controlled the most critical technology of the future. They possessed unassailable technical leads. They owned all the key patents. Then 1973 transpired the petroleum crisis. America utilized economic pressure against Japan. Nothing dramatic, just exchange negotiations, monetary policy. But Japan recognized something terrifying. Their entire electronics industry, their entire economic miracle, depended on American goodwill. One policy determination in Washington could cripple Japanese manufacturing. Dependency equals vulnerability. They observed it clearly. So they launched a national semiconductor initiative, the VLSI project. Very large-scale integration. The Japanese government poured billions into domestic chip manufacturing. They constructed a government industry consortium. They funded research. They constructed fabs. They trained engineers. American executives witnessed and laughed. Intel's CEO stated publicly, "The Japanese are copycats. They'll never innovate past us. They don't possess our entrepreneurial culture." Silicon Valley genuinely believed Japanese chips would always be inferior. They were measuring innovation. Japan was measuring independence. Different games again. 1,980. Japanese chips started appearing in global marketplaces. Lower performance than American chips, but cheaper, much cheaper. American companies weren't worried yet. They still controlled the high-end marketplace. 1,983, Japanese chip quality improved dramatically. Still behind American cutting edge, but good enough for most applications. American executives started becoming concerned. They lobbied for protection exchange barriers, anti-dumping investigations. 1,986, Japan's semiconductor manufacturing exceeded America's for the initial time. The American semiconductor industry lost 62,000 jobs in 18 months. Intel almost proceeded bankrupt. They had to completely exit the DRAM memory business, which they invented because they couldn't compete with Japanese manufacturing scale. American chip companies lost $38 billion in marketplace value between 1,985 and 1,992, $38 billion. Gone. Verified. Undeniable. But here's what's truly haunting about this case. America observed it transpiring. They possessed almost a decade of warning. From 1973 to 1986, 13 years, they witnessed Japan invest in semiconductors. They recognized Japan was constructing capability. They just didn't believe Japan would actually achieve independence. They thought technical superiority signified permanent dominance. They were incorrect. Because once a nation determines dependency as a national security threat, economics becomes irrelevant. Efficiency becomes irrelevant. Marketplace forces become irrelevant. Survival overrides everything. Japan was willing to overspend on semiconductors for a decade to achieve independence. And once they achieved it, they never returned to purchasing American. Japan reorganized Asian electronics manufacturing around their semiconductor base. South Korea learned from Japan and constructed their own chip industry. Taiwan learned from both and constructed TSMC. America expended the 1,990 seconds attempting desperately to regain lost ground in memory chips. They never did. The pattern repeated perfectly. Still not convinced? Think maybe these are old examples that don't apply to modern global marketplaces? Let me provide you case study 3. Europe versus Russian energy decoupling, 2000 to 2024. This one is recent. You witnessed it transpire. Russia supplied 40% of Europe's natural gas. Germany alone purchased 55% of its gas from Gazprom. Nord Stream pipelines pumped Russian gas directly into European homes and factories. The entire European industrial model was constructed on cheap Russian energy. European manufacturing, European heating, European electricity generation, all dependent on Russian gas. Russia believed this dependency made them untouchable. Russian energy executives stated openly, "Europe will never abandon Russian gas. They possess no alternative. We possess all the leverage." They were so confident they utilized energy as a geopolitical weapon. They threatened to sever supplies during negotiations. They manipulated valuations. They believed dependency signified permanent security. It didn't. It signified permanent vulnerability. 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. Europe threatened sanctions. Russia threatened gas cutoffs. Nothing transpired. Both sides backed down, but Europe learned something. Dependency equals vulnerability. If Russia can threaten supply, Europe is exposed. So, quietly, slowly, Europe started constructing alternatives, LNG, import terminals, pipeline connections to Norway, renewable energy investments. Russia witnessed and dismissed it. Russian officials stated LNG expenses 3 times more than pipeline gas. Renewable energy is intermittent and unreliable. Europe will never switch. They're economically rational. They were measuring expense. Europe was measuring security. Different games again. 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Europe possessed no selection. They had to respond. So they prohibited Russian energy imports almost overnight. Russian gas exports to Europe dropped by 83% in 12 months. Russian energy export revenue collapsed by $48 billion in 1 year. $48 billion gone. Gazprom proceeded from massive profits to massive deficits in a single quarter. But here's the critical detail. Europe compensated triple for energy. German industrial companies confronted energy expenses 300% elevated than before. European households observed heating bills quadruple. European economies contracted. And they still didn't return to Russian gas. Because once the dependency fractured, once the alternative infrastructure existed, there was no returning. Trust was gone. Security concerns overrode economics. Europe is now constructing permanent LNG infrastructure, permanent renewable capacity, permanent connections to non-Russian suppliers. Russia lost European energy leverage forever. Verified. Undeniable. Russia believed dependency signified authority. It signified vulnerability. Europe accepted massive economic pain to achieve energy independence. And now, Europe will never be dependent on Russian energy again. The pattern repeated for the third time. Stage 1, dependency architecture. Stage 2, asymmetric investment in alternatives. Stage 3, sudden decoupling. Stage 4, permanent restructuring. Russia is now attempting to sell gas to Asia at massive discounts. They'll never recover European revenue. Are you observing it yet? 3 completely different situations, different centuries, different technologies, different countries, same precise pattern, same precise sequence, same precise outcome. The dominant authority always believes dependency equals security. They're always shocked when the dependent nation achieves independence. They always lose their marketplace permanently. And they always expend decades attempting to recover without success. Now, let me demonstrate you why China just activated this pattern on a scale the world has never observed. Because what's transpiring right now makes all 3 previous examples appear small. The semiconductor marketplace is bigger than all of those combined. The geopolitical implications are more severe, and the timeline is compressing. What required 20 years in previous cycles is transpiring in 5. Stage 1. Dependency architecture. America controls advanced semiconductor manufacturing. ASML constructs the lithography machines. TSMC executes the fabrication plants. Nvidia designs the AI chips. Qualcomm makes the mobile processors. Intel supplies the computer chips. Applied Materials provides manufacturing equipment. The entire global technology stack executes on American-controlled semiconductors. And China is the largest customer by far. 73% of global semiconductor demand originates from Chinese manufacturing. Chinese companies purchase $350 billion worth of foreign chips every single year. $350 billion. American policymakers love this arrangement. They stated, China requires our chips. That provides us leverage. We can utilize chip access as a negotiating tool. Think about what that sentence actually signifies. If China requires American chips, then Chinese manufacturing is vulnerable to American political determinations. Every smartphone factory in Shenzhen depends on chips America controls. Every data center in Beijing executes on chips America approves. Every Chinese military system operates on chips America supplies. Total dependency. And China recognized this clearly in 2018. That's when the Trump administration prohibited Huawei from purchasing American semiconductors overnight. No warning, no negotiation, executive order, done. Huawei's smartphone business, which was challenging Apple for global dominance, collapsed by 87% within 2 years. 87% from selling over 200 million phones per year to 26 million because they couldn't obtain American chips. One policy determination in Washington destroyed the world's second largest smartphone company in 24 months. That was China's awakening call. That was their 1973 petroleum crisis moment. That was their realization that dependency equals vulnerability. And China doesn't execute anything small. They launched the largest industrial mobilization in human history, the Big Fund. Phase 1. $140 billion for semiconductor investment. Phase 2. $200 billion. Phase 3, just announced last year, another $200 billion. But that's just the government currency. Chinese provinces added another $100 billion. Chinese state-owned banks provided $300 billion in subsidized loans. Chinese venture capital poured in another $80 billion. Total investment, over $800 billion dedicated to achieving semiconductor independence. $800 billion. Stage 1 complete. Verified. But here's what American analysts missed. They observed China's chip investments and stated, they're 10 years behind TSMC. They'll never catch up. We possess nothing to worry about. Same thing British steel executives stated about America. Same thing American chip companies stated about Japan. Same thing Russian energy officials stated about Europe. Measuring the incorrect thing. China wasn't attempting to catch up to TSMC's 3-nanometer process. They were attempting to reach minimum viable independence, and they just did. Stage 2. Asymmetric investment response. Examine what China actually constructed between 2019 and today. SMIC Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, China's largest chip maker, increased manufacturing capacity by 400%. 400% in 5 years. They proceeded from producing chips at 45 nanometer nodes to producing chips at 7 nanometer nodes. Not 3 nanometer like TSMC, but 7 nanometer is good enough for 78% of all semiconductor applications. Cars require 28 nanometer chips. Home appliances require 45 nanometer chips. Industrial equipment requires 65 nanometer chips. Telecommunications gear requires 14 nanometer chips. All of that is well within China's current capability. Yangtze Memory Technologies constructed the world's third largest NAND flash memory manufacturing facility. NAND flash is the memory in your phone, your laptop, your tablet, your camera. China can now produce that domestically. CXMT Changxin Memory Technologies constructed DRAM manufacturing capability. DRAM is the working memory in every computer. China can produce that domestically. Nora Technology developed semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Not as advanced as ASML or Applied Materials, but functional. China can construct fabs with mostly Chinese equipment now. And here's the component that should terrify American chip companies. Chinese engineers and scientists are returning home. 15,000 semiconductor engineers who were operating in Silicon Valley, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan returned to China between 2020 and 2024. They brought expertise. They brought technical knowledge. They brought trade secrets. China offered them triple salaries, research funding, and national importance. They arrived home. American companies weren't worried because they concentrated on the cutting edge. They stated, China still can't make 3 nanometer chips, we're still ahead, measuring the incorrect metric again. China doesn't require to make 3 nanometer chips to achieve independence. They require to make chips good enough to execute the Chinese economy without American suppliers. And they can now today. That threshold was crossed sometime in late 2024. Most analysts still haven't recognized it. Verified, undeniable. Stage 2 complete. By the time U.S. export controls tightened in 2022, attempting to restrict China's access to advanced chip-making equipment, China had already constructed enough domestic capacity to survive without American chips. The export controls hurt. They decelerated China down, but they didn't halt them. And more importantly, they demonstrated to China that America would weaponize semiconductor access, which made achieving full independence even more urgent. The export controls guaranteed China would never voluntarily return to dependency. Stage 3. Sudden decoupling. 3 weeks ago, China announced a complete prohibition on American semiconductor imports for critical infrastructure government systems, telecommunications, defense, energy. Last week, they expanded it. No American chips in any device sold to Chinese government entities or state-owned enterprises. That's 47% of China's electronics marketplace gone overnight. American chips are now prohibited from almost half of Chinese demand. And yesterday, documents leaked from the Chinese Ministry of Industry and Information Technology suggesting Phase 3 of the prohibition, a complete prohibition on American chips in all domestically sold electronics by 2027. Phones, computers, appliances, cars, everything. If it's sold in China, it can't possess American semiconductors. Total decoupling in 3 years. Let me demonstrate you what that signifies in numbers. Nvidia earned $43 billion from Chinese customers last year. Prohibited. Gone. That's 26% of Nvidia's total revenue. Qualcomm earned $31 billion from China. Gone 19% of their revenue. Intel earned $17 billion from China. Gone. AMD earned $12 billion. Micron earned $8 billion. Broadcom earned $14 billion. Add it up. American chip companies collectively earned $192 billion annually from Chinese customers. $192 billion. That revenue is about to vanish over the next 3 years. But wait, you might be contemplating, China can't just prohibit American chips. They require them. Their technology isn't good enough yet. That's what Britain thought about American steel. That's what America thought about Japanese semiconductors. That's what Russia thought about European energy dependence. They're always incorrect. Because the dependent nation isn't attempting to match quality. They're attempting to achieve sufficiency. And China is sufficient now. Let me demonstrate it. Chinese smartphone companies Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, Honor already released phones utilizing entirely Chinese semiconductors. Chips from SMIC, memory from Yangtze Memory, processors from HiSilicon. Are they as fast as phones with American chips? No. Do they operate? Yes. Do Chinese consumers care about the 3% performance distinction? No. Can China execute its entire smartphone industry on domestic chips? Yes. That's sufficiency. That's independence. Chinese data centers are already utilizing domestically produced server chips. Alibaba Cloud, Tencent Cloud, Baidu Cloud, all executing on Chinese semiconductors. Are they as efficient as Intel or AMD data center chips? No. Do they operate? Yes. Can China execute its entire cloud computing infrastructure on domestic chips? Yes. Independence achieved. Chinese automotive companies are utilizing domestic chips. BYD, Geely, NIO, Li Auto, all executing on Chinese automotive semiconductors. Good enough to control electric vehicles, good enough to manage batteries, good enough to execute infotainment systems. American automotive chips are superior. Chinese automotive chips are sufficient. Different standards, same outcome, independence. This is the switch flip. This is stage 3 transpiring in real time. And most American investors still think this is negotiable. They think this is a bargaining tactic. They think China will eventually back down because they require American technology. They won't, because this isn't about technology anymore. This is about sovereignty. This is about national security. This is about never being vulnerable to American policy determinations again. Once a nation commits to independence at this level, there's no returning. The determination is made, the investment is expended, the infrastructure is constructed, the switch is flipped. Verified. Undeniable. We are witnessing stage 3 unfold right now, and it's accelerating. If you're witnessing this video and you're not subscribed, subscribe now, because the next 3 months will demonstrate every word of this analysis correct. And you'll desire to observe what transpires next before it transpires. What I'm about to inform you about stage 4 will demonstrate you precisely which companies will collapse first, and precisely how to position yourself before the marketplaces fully price this in. Stage 4, permanent restructuring. This is the component most analysts refuse to believe. They think this is temporary. They state once tensions calm down, exchange will resume. This is just politics. Marketplaces will normalize. They're incorrect. Once China achieves full semiconductor independence, they will never voluntarily return to purchasing American chips. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, not in 20 years. Never. Why would they? Why would any nation expend $800 billion achieving independence only to voluntarily return to dependency? They wouldn't. No nation in history ever has, and China won't be the initial. Here's precisely how the permanent restructuring will unfold. China becomes the world's low-expense semiconductor producer. They possess newer fabs constructed with the latest equipment. They possess cheaper labor than America, Taiwan, or Korea. They possess lower electricity expenses. They possess government subsidies eliminating profit pressure. And most importantly, they possess a protected $560 billion domestic marketplace that guarantees